Hello, welcome to Common Censored. I'm Lee Camp, joined actually in studio for the first time in like a month and a half, Eleanor Goldfield.
Hello. It'll be so nice to not have to splice this shit together in Pro Tools after the fact. I'm just saying.
I did notice that you would often splice it incorrectly so that I sounded really drum. Like you'd make a great, really cogent point, and then you just splice in me going "durr," which really sucked. But.
Damn it! I was hoping you wouldn't notice that.
Thank you guys for joining us. This is a show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions, and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes other stuff.
This is a huge week of news, a huge week of or month of what's going on right now. So we got a lot to get through. Something I kind of just wanted to get out of the way real quick is, and we'll be talking about this on various other platforms. I did a moment of clarity that had some words about it as well in there. But anyway, our friend and fellow activist and comrade Kevin Zeese has passed away unexpectedly. He also co-founded Popular Resistance, which this is on the Popular Resistance Podcast Network. So we have a lot of connection to Popular Resistance and to Kevin. And we won't get into how amazing he was, how awesome he was. I just wanted to let you know that we talk about that on other platforms. It's tough to keep digging it up and digging at the wounds over and over again. But I wanted to let everybody know that Kevin Zeese's online vigil, which I'm told everybody is invited to, is September 19th at 3 p.m. Eastern at the following web address. So if you want to write this down, if you'd like to attend, it's bit.ly/Kevin Zeese. There's a capital K and capital Z, but I don't think that matters. But in case it does, capital K, capital Z, Kevin Zeese, bit.ly/Kevin Zeese. And anyway, I'm sure that would be wonderful with a lot of wonderful people there, and we will save most of what we're going to say for that. Did I get everything?
Yeah, I'm remaining quiet because if I don't, I'll just start quietly sobbing into the microphone, and no one needs to hear that.
Well, it doesn't make for the best radio.
No.
But it's understandable. But yeah, and we also we'll be talking a little about it on our live stream this coming Sunday, so less than a week from now. We will be doing a live stream at youtube.com/momentofclarity. And yeah, there's a lot to be said, but we will save most of it for later.
But please do join us 8 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. I don't know the date, but it's this coming Sunday. And we'll be over at youtube.com/momentofclarity. And it's our first live stream in a while.
I think 13th,
so
September 13th.
Please do join us over there.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so jumping into something that is only barely less traumatic, Julian Assange's trial. I wanted to give some updates on that. His extradition trial has begun. It started with one of the biggest ongoing slights to justice, ongoing attacks against justice. Basically, you probably heard that the U.S. added a bunch of new superseding indictments. So they had already had something like 17 or 18 indictments against Julian Assange for the Espionage Act, which is ridiculous because no journalist has ever been charged with the Espionage Act under the Espionage Act. On top of that, this is a not an American, not in America. So it's completely, utterly horseshit ridiculous. And I think the U.S. government started to realize that. They started to realize that even with the UK government and this clown UK judge falling all over themselves to make sure Julian Assange gets extradited, they still realize they might lose this. And so they now have added these superseding indictments that include things like pressuring someone to hack an Icelandic bank and helping Edward Snowden avoid capture. First of all, the charges like the Icelandic bank and things like that, come from FBI informants, come from these FBI trolls that the FBI put up to basically go befriend Julian Assange and see if you can get stuff on him. So they're completely not trustworthy. And then the Snowden thing is it illegal to help someone avoid capture when they have yet to be charged with anything? It's completely horseshit on all levels. But anyway, that aside, what happened at the beginning of this trial was Julian's representatives, his defense attorneys, went in there and said, we need to get rid of, excise this superseding indictment. It's ridiculous. It's been tacked on. Never before can we find a precedent for tacking on 2 weeks before a trial a superseding indictment like this. It's ridiculous. And they hope the judge would say, you're right, this isn't normal. We'll get rid of the superseding indictment. And if they want to indict him on those things, they can do that later. But instead, the judge said, nah, let's keep it all on there. So then Assange's attorneys were like, well, as much as it hurts us to do this because it keeps Assange in jail for another 6 months in prison, we want to put this off till January because we have not had time to prepare for these other charges, or they're not charges actually, which is part of how like other news sources are getting it wrong. We have not had time to prepare for these other indictments, and so therefore we need time to prepare, which we don't want to do this because it keeps Assange in jail for many more months. And the judge was like, nah, you didn't have time to prepare. I don't care. She's like, you should have spent your 2 weeks getting ready to prepare. And then the defense said, we can hardly speak to our client. We've had a few phone calls with him, and the phone calls are piecemeal and short, and we're trying to explain in-depth documents, long legalese documents to him, and it's just impossible. And the judge is like, nah, don't care. And the aggressive attack on any form of open criminal justice open justice system is just crazy. Like, they're also forbidding the current editor of WikiLeaks, which technically it's his organization under attack right now, from being in that courtroom. They've put him in a separate screening room where he can't even see the screen. So
it's not really a screening room, is it?
Yeah, not much of a screen. I don't think you understand the term screening room. Anyway, this is kind of the abbreviated list of the egregious attacks on justice that are going on in this trial.
Well, it reminds me, you talking about the judge there reminds me of the judge that John Kiriakou is told this story to me and many people many times, but how he was told basically at his trial, you're not allowed to share any evidence on your behalf. So the only people that were allowed to give evidence were the people that were giving evidence against him. Right. He wasn't allowed to give evidence in his own defense. And this really speaks to the fact that these judges are there. They are in those places of power because they are these kind of people. The reason that they have those spots is because the system knows, oh, no matter what, this judge is going to say whatever the fuck we want them to say. And so it's really it's like a foregone conclusion. Like, whatever the state thinks, these judges in those particular courts will say whatever the state wants.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's not an accident that this woman has gotten to this spot. Like, and the UK government knows that, the US government knows that. They didn't like go into this courtroom thinking, I hope we get a good judge. Right. Like, they knew this is the person who deals with these type of issues, and she is in that spot for a reason, because she has proven to fawn over, bend over, just give up to whatever the government wants at any stage. And you speak of Kiriakou, who, he was the CIA whistleblower, and they put forward, he and his defense said, here are 70, I think it was 70, or anyway, it was dozens. Maybe 70 might be wrong, but dozens of witnesses that we want to testify that John Kiriakou is not a spy. He's not trying to harm the U.S. And and she said no to all of them, that would be the same judge that Assange would get if he were extradited here. It would be that same woman who allowed no evidence to defend Kyriakou.
Well, and I think the point that you made earlier when we were talking before we recorded is a good one, that they're dropping the espionage charges for right now because they realize they can't really go after them, but they could easily just bring them up if and when Assange is extradited to the United States and be like, just kidding, actually yes to espionage.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if I guess dropping is not the term. I think they're focusing on the superseding indictments, but so I don't think they've dropped the espionage. But you're absolutely right. They would bring those back into play so that they could imprison him for 175 years or whatever it is, as opposed to 2 years for helping Snowden evade capture or something. I was going to say, with the espionage thing, here's how this is working. So one of the first witnesses was this journalism professor, I can't remember which university, a U.S. university, who testified on behalf of Assange, saying leaking or reporting on classified information is done on nearly a weekly basis in journalism. It's kind of endless in terms of getting information from anonymous sources, deep background, revealing things that the government has not outwardly said, yes, you can report on this, is standard journalism practice on every level. And so this guy comes in here to say this, and then the government's response to this witness is to say to him, are you aware that none of the indictments against Assange have to do with leaking classified information? Because they've basically tried to say that. They've tried to say, no, it's because he helped. He helped. Even the earlier indictments, which they're now avoiding, are like, no, it's because he helped Manning get the information. They're not saying it's for revealing the information. And so they're trying to play this fucking ridiculous game where they're like, we're not mad at him. We don't want to charge him because he revealed the war crimes of the American Empire.
That's not it.
That's not it. We want to get him because he told someone to hack an Icelandic bank. Yeah, right. And to watch anybody who can consider themselves a judge or a representative of the court, to fucking listen to this shit is just so incredible. And at one point, actually, it was when they came after that professor and said, are you aware none of this has to do with leaking classified information? Assange apparently yelled horse shit or bullshit or something. And the judge said, you do that one more time and I won't allow you back in this courtroom or something.
And just to be clear, he's already in like a fucking plastic cage or whatever it is. I haven't yet
verified whether he's still in the plastic box.
Oh, I thought I know he was.
I know he was the last time they had him in court, but it's possible I don't know whether he is or not. I haven't heard talk of the plastic box this time around, but needless to say, the last time they had him in court, they had him in a fucking plastic box where he couldn't even, talk to his lawyers. He couldn't, hear what was going on.
Right, yeah.
It was like Hannibal Lecter.
I know. It's remarkable.
But he very well may still be in the box. I don't know.
How about some good news, Lee?
Let's move on to good news. Let's move on to successes against police departments based on protests. I mean, I can guarantee you neither of the things we're about to tell you would have happened without protest, large scale, small scale, across the country. So let's start with the most recent one, or the one that is the most topical. Is that so? Rochester, the cops there killed a man. I'm trying to remember. I think it's another suffocation case where they kind of kneeled on him for an hour or whatever it was.
Daniel Prude.
Am I right that it was a lack of breathing?
I'm not sure.
Where they fucking choked him to death or something. Anyway, so they killed this man. It's on video. It's very obvious. And so there's been massive protests in Rochester, and they're ongoing. They very well could be going tonight as well. But the latest step is that the entire higher echelon of the police department has resigned, but let's say were fired. They, forced to resign, I'm sure. I seriously doubt they were like, you know what? We haven't done a good job But so this is coming from some, corporate shill at BuzzFeed, reporting that after days of protest in Rochester over the killing of Daniel Prude, Mayor Lovely Warren, what a name.
I know.
Just announced entire Rochester Police Department command staff, including the chief of police, is resigning.
And this came just a few days after the chief of police said that he had no plans to resign. So some shit went down. And actually,
He was like, no, I'm staying, and he could feel the screen door being pushed close behind him.
Wait. So basically, I've seen some amazing footage from Rochester where activists, the one video that I saw, activists were practicing with shields, creating kind of. Okay, I don't know if anyone's seen the movie Braveheart, but you know that scene in Braveheart where they put up their shields against the
like
the
a shield
arrows?
wall.
Yeah,
with like a ceiling.
right.
Shield ceiling.
This video that I saw of the protesters, they were doing that with shields that said ACAB and like defund the police and shit. It was amazing. It was so.
Wait, did they also show their asses through their kilts? Lift up their kilts?
The serious question is, were there kilts, and if not, why? But it was brilliant. It was really beautifully done. And so the clear message there was that there is a coordinated and very resolute pushback against the police in Rochester. And so this news is coming after, obviously after that video was filmed that I saw, and it'll be interesting to see how this affects the protests in the streets. In response to a reporter's question as to who was going to police the protests, the mayor said, "I don't know." So
this is interesting.
That's kind of cool because it basically means that the protesters now, at this point, do not have to go up against the brutality of the police. Of course, this could be very terrifying if the mayor then decides, oh, now would be a good time to call in the National Guard or something like that.
Right. Well, and this next line by this again hack at BuzzFeed is interesting. Paul McLeod, he says, just spoke to Reverend Myra Brown, one of the elders attending the Rochester demonstrations as a sort of buffer between protesters and police. She's worried it will be bad again tonight if the outgoing chief and police under him no longer feel they need to follow the mayor's directions.
Meaning,
I guess, because they said we're stepping down, therefore we no longer have to listen to the mayor. Meaning
they're going to go rogue and be like white militia in the streets killing protesters?
Yeah, I don't really know what that means. Maybe there's a scenario where, because when the mayor said, I don't know who's going to take charge, that could mean that someone at the police department takes charge without even, talking to elected officials, which could make them completely unaccountable to any sort of elected officials.
So, as a segue into the other story, the interesting thing about and I don't have all the details of Prude's death, but one of the demands of the protesters was not only that, because there were 7 officers involved in Prude's death, which, first of all, why the fuck are there 7 people involved in the death of one person? This is grotesque. But also, those 7 officers have been suspended without pay. The New York Attorney General's office has opened an investigation, but protesters demanded that they be fired, not just suspended. When I was in high school, you could get suspended for cheating on a test, killing someone,
or
Jesus
showing
Christ.
up with, or especially if you were female at the time, showing up with shorts that were too short.
Oh yes, my high school was particularly fascist.
Men could
that.
show up in a thong. I think it was fine.
But the protesters also demanded that the police be barred from responding to mental health calls. And beyond that, they wanted the police department defunded. But that's an interesting point flowing into that next story that you found, Lee, from Denver.
Yeah, I love this. This is what I've talked about a lot. So have you, that police should not be doing about 90 or more % of their jobs, quote unquote, their jobs. We call the police for fucking everything. We call them because music is too loud. We call them because, in one of the examples I'm about to give, someone called the cops because they saw a guy setting up a tent near their home. And In Denver, apparently this has been 4 years in the making, so I'm guessing the plans for this started with the initial Black Lives Matter push years ago. But Denver has now switched so that many 911 calls, rather than given to police, are given to a mental health service, an organization that sends mental health workers. They go by STAR, STAR, which stands for something I'm missing. Support Team Assistance Response. And I was about to make something up, which would have been real good. Suppository.
Socialist, tenacious.
Yes. Ass responders. So STAR, mental health professionals show up for things, and they give some of the examples. They've already shown up since they started in June. They've already gone to several hundred calls. I think they said 350 calls so far. Now, of course, this is a tiny percentage of the thousands of calls that 911 gets for, everything from someone saying they don't know where they are, can they get directions, to other things like someone setting up a tent. And in that case, in this article from Denver, a guy is setting up a tent near a house, and they send the mental health professionals rather than the cops, and they go, and of course, it's just a homeless person who thought they'd set up their tent there.
To fucking sleep.
Whereas you send people with guns to go confront a homeless person, and a certain percentage of that time, you're going to have that guy killed.
Well, there's also...
Or arrested where his life's destroyed. So
there's also, the other side of this is that if you see somebody close to your home setting up a tent, what you should do, if you're not a fucking sociopath, you should walk out with, maybe some food, maybe a pillow and a blanket or something, and say, hey, I'm really sorry that this is the situation, but, I'd like to help. Here's some whatever the fuck. You don't fucking call the police. Are you out of your... You don't even call... You fucking just be a human being, for fuck's sake. Jesus Christ. I'm sorry.
No, I love it. Normally, I'm the one that short circuits. I like to see you short circuit sometimes.
I just don't get it. I don't fucking understand.
People think the police are their daddies and their mommies.
But even if you did,
daddy,
why
there's
would
a strange man
But
there.
why would you call
Daddy.
your mommy or your daddy if there's a fucking person who wants to sleep? Fuck.
No. I mean, look, I agree with you. I'm going off the sad infantile mental response that a lot of people have, which is, daddy, mommy, that's a scary person out there. I don't know who they are or what they're doing, so I'm going to call daddy and mommy to come deal with it. Daddy and mommy show up with guns and shoot the guy. That's incredibly fucked up, but in our social engineering, we're taught that that's the way to deal with a lot of things, and especially in white suburban America is probably where it's worst. You're taught, that the cops are your best friends, and they always do good, and you've never really met someone who's had an incident with the cops where they just treated someone like shit, and so you think the cops are your wonderful protectors.
Well, and of course, I'm going off on a tangent here, but sorry. It just shifted the whole table. That's how angry I am. I'm about to flip the fucking table. No, wait, I'm on the other side. Don't do that. The base problem here is the grotesque othering. It's not just the othering in the sense that you are a different person. It's the othering as you're not even fucking human. And a big problem here is that people don't recognize the humanity of unhoused people or even poor people in general. I think one of the things that as a young, well, I guess I was a kid. I was 19, and I was riding the bus in LA, and I'm a philosophy nerd, so I was sitting there reading a book by Nietzsche, and this guy who was clearly homeless. And I say that because I'd seen him around. I didn't just think that he dressed shitty, because a lot of people in LA dress shitty. So he started talking to me about it, and it turns out that he had been a philosophy professor, and they had gotten rid of him because, fuck old professors, I guess. And he didn't have anything, he was in his 50s, and he was I don't have anywhere to go.
They've succeeded in making pushing fewer students into taking things like philosophy. So there's a much smaller number of jobs. Instead, they're all taking business classes.
But the point being is that this was probably one of the first times in my life that I had ever had like a longer conversation with a homeless person. I'd like said hi to homeless folks and stuff, and I was brought up to treat everyone like a fucking human being. But this was the first time.
Fucking Swedish hippies.
This was the first time that I had like a longer conversation with a homeless person, and was like, it was the first time I guess I really recognized that everyone is so close to being homeless. And it didn't hurt that I had already been homeless in my life, but I like that everybody is, especially in the United States where there's no fucking safety net.
Yeah.
You are one disaster, you're one cancer diagnosis away from being fucking homeless.
42% of all new cancer patients lose their entire life savings.
Right. So
in 2 years.
This sort of grotesque othering that suggests that you would even need to call police or really any armed people to deal with a person who is just trying to look for a place to sleep or find food or whatever is fucking grotesque. And yeah, I just needed to say that.
I agree. No,
that was a severe tangent. I apologize.
You and I have given these rants not that I don't mean you gave that rant, but I mean given the rants on the idea before that calling the cops for all these reasons is fucking idiotic and awful, and this is one step in the right direction. So in Denver, they are now not sending cops, not sending people with guns with very little mental health training. Both dealing with mental health problems and dealing with their own mental health problems, which cops have a lot of. They now are not sending cops to all those calls. Another example they gave was a woman who was in the middle of like downtown or something, and she was sitting on a curbside just sobbing, and probably looked disheveled as well. And someone called the cops. Because they think they didn't call the cops. I can guarantee you this person did not call the cops as in get this sobbing person out of my way. They called the cops because they have this view of the cops as the helpers of society. And so in their mind, you call the cops and the cops come and they go, oh my God, there's a distressed woman here. We will help. They do not, the people that are calling the cops for that type of thing do not understand that there's a 50-50 shot, or maybe worse, that these cops will either arrest this person, upending their life, putting him in jail where they can't get out because they don't have the cash, which also should be illegal, cash to get themselves out of jail. They might not have an ID. They could end up in prison for years, or they get arrested and they don't want to be arrested, so they swing a punch, and now they've assaulted a police officer. Like, these people don't understand. These are not good people to call for someone in need. And so anyway, the call goes to 911, girl on the corner sobbing. Instead of sending the cops, they send mental health professionals. They show up. It turns out the woman had something had happened in her life. She had no money, and she didn't know where she was in town. Like, literally couldn't figure out where she was, and had no phone and no money. And it was hot out. And so she's basically stuck in the heat without a phone or money or anything. And they basically said, how can we, they get her water and everything. They say, how can we help? Where can we drive you? And they solve the problem. Instead, cops, sometimes they help the person. A lot of times they arrest the person. A lot of other times they just say, get the fuck out of here and go on your way.
Move along.
So anyway, this is one of these good ideas that should be far more prevalent in our society, and instead, as I've said before, we run from good ideas like it's an angry beehive that wants to talk to you about life insurance. It's fucking ridiculous. We need to take good ideas from various cities around the country and implement them all over the place.
And I will say that I don't know if this is a direct descendant, so to speak, of the Cahoots model, which started in Eugene, Oregon, as part of the Whitebird Clinic there. I had one of the guys from the Whitebird Clinic on my show act out a while back, but it's a great organization that's been doing this now for quite some time. And one of the things that they also do is they offer trainings and basically ride-alongs for folks from other cities to see how they do it. And they have a an understanding with dispatch, same as what seems to be the case in Denver, where if somebody calls 911, says like, hey, this person's sobbing on the street corner, this person seems like really whacked out on drugs, they send the Cahoots team, which includes one medic, either a nurse or an EMT, and a crisis worker who has at least several years experience in the mental health field. And basically their goal is to, and I'm quoting from their website, to create immediate stabilization in case of urgent medical need or psychological crisis, assessment, information, referral, advocacy, and in some cases, transportation to the next step in treatment. So this is basically like the ideal alternative to calling the police. And actually, just earlier in August, Senator Ron Wyden, who I've battled before, but apparently has some non-shitty ideas, announced plans to introduce a bill in the U.S. Senate aimed at bringing the Cahoots response model, mental health services, to cities and towns across the nation through increased Medicaid funding. So that would be exactly what you mentioned, Lee, that this good idea would then spread across the country. And to be clear, I am a abolitionist in terms of police, but in terms of, the steps towards making that a reality, this is a huge step. And actually, when I spoke to the guy at Cahoots, he said that the police were very thought of this favorably because it meant that they weren't called for these situations
because they have no empathy, so they're not interested in dealing with those kind of situations.
No.
That's no fun to them.
And so this was actually this is a great way of and here again, what better way to defund the police than basically cut in half or more the amount of situations that they're called for. That means that you don't need as many police. It means that you don't need as many hours for those police.
Right.
So really what you're creating is a proactive way of defunding the police and at the same time making space for mental health professionals and medical professionals to pick up that slack.
And one point of this conversation, which you and I touched on before we started taping, was I hope we have a strong enough and smart enough society that can break their social engineering enough so that when, and it is inevitable, it may take 2 years, it may take 4 years, depending on how many calls these mental health professionals go on, eventually one of them will get seriously injured or killed in dealing with someone with mental health issues. And the question is, will the society, in this case it's Denver, but let's say any city, realize that, yeah, that's a risk just like driving is a risk. You drive a bunch and there's a chance you're going to end up in an accident and die. That doesn't mean we've outlawed driving. And so it will happen eventually. And does that mean that city is going to say, see, we told you it should only be people with guns dealing with all this stuff? And instead, they need a lot of very bold, smart people saying, no, this is unfortunately a very small risk. These people have dealt with thousands of calls, and this happened once. It's a very small risk, but it's worth taking so that the cops aren't arresting and killing thousands. That needs to be the discussion that is had if and when that bad thing happens. We need to be able to face it and say, that's okay. This is still a positive idea. This is still the way of the future.
Well, and I think it's worth noting that I don't know exactly how long Cahoots has been going, but at least 20 years, they have never had any of their workers die in any of their calls.
That's great.
So I think, and this is part of, and I'm not saying that you're wrong. I think that, the law of averages suggests that at some point, yes, that will happen. But I think that it's also worth noting that folks with mental health problems are much more likely to self-harm than to do harm to others. That's just statistics. And this this idea that people with mental health are always on the lookout to hurt people is
No, I wasn't saying
no. I know
that.
that's not what you're saying, but I think it just bears
Right.
mentioning, because I think that's also a problem that when people encounter people with mental health problems, they get scared because they're like, oh my God, my life is in danger. When in reality, it's usually the opposite, that this person with mental health problems who's having like an episode or something is more likely to be a risk to themselves than to others. Of course, that's not always the case, but overwhelmingly that is the case.
No, that's and that's why I'm saying I think this would be an incredibly rare instance, but it could happen. Just
Right.
like for a while, occasionally postal workers would get killed, and we didn't say, well, clearly the answer is to end postal work.
Well, apparently some people did, because that's
okay.
what's
happening now. Yeah, that's what. Wouldn't that be
that's
great?
not the reason.
I actually would love that. Would actually make a lot more sense if Trump came forward and was like, "Look, we need to get rid of the post office because a lot of people get shot there." Like, I'd be like, "All right, fine, you fucking maniac." Anyway, we brought you some good news. A quick note here. Let's see. Eleanor's movie is at hardroadofhope.com. Please go check it out. It's won a lot of awards, and you can watch it there. Also, if you feel like you've gotten any even $1 of content out of this show, please go to patreon.com/commoncensored. We have no ads for anything other than our own stuff. So, we're not sponsored by anybody. Please keep the show going. My comedy special is free at leecampamerican.com. You can watch it tonight, have a good evening at the movies, so to speak. And also, you can get all of Eleanor's work at artkillingapathy.com, writing, video, all of it is there. Her podcast is Act Out as well, called Act Out. And you can email us topics and ideas at commoncensored@protonmail.com. We'll try to answer your questions if you send them there. And lastly, my book is now 20% off if you go to leecampbook.com and use the coupon code, the initials of the title, BPAPL. Now 20% off, so you get the paperback for I don't know what it is, $12 or $15 or something. No, I think it's more closer to 12. Anyway, grab the book.
Do it.
Let's move on.
So, today we're recording this on Wednesday, September 9th. Today is the second day in the scholar strike. If you might have come across it if you were scrolling on the Twitter. Hashtag scholar strike. It was organized by Dr. Anthea Butler, a religious studies and Africana studies professor at the University of Pennsylvania, and Kevin Gannon, a history professor at Grandview University in Iowa. And this was kind of in response to the athlete strike that happened earlier. It's a 2-day strike, basically following quote unquote Labor Day. I have a thing with it. Never mind. It's not important. It's not fucking Labor Day. Labor Day is May Day. I'm sorry, but this is some bullshit. It's made up to amputate people from the radical history of the labor rights movement. That's it. I'm done.
I think they've heard you say this before. They know.
Okay, thank you. So this was
and Arbor Day's not really about trees.
I'm having these very, very extreme tangential outbursts today. I'm not really sure why. Maybe it was that green tea that I just drank. Okay, anyway. Maybe it's the jet lag. Who knows? So
maybe it's Maybelline.
It's definitely not that. So this is a 2-day strike that is basically Tuesday, September 8th and Wednesday, September 9th, highlighting issues of social justice and systemic racism. The two professors, again, Dr. Butler and Gannon, who organized this, wrote on the Academy Magazine blog, quote, "It is time for the academic community to do more than teach classes and offer reading lists on racism, policing, violence, and racial injustice. It is time for us to pause the endless meetings on diversity and inclusion, disrupt our institutions' routines, look outward to the American public, and share our dismay, disgust, and resolve." And thousands of teachers from around the nation, even places like Harvard, community colleges, even divinity schools, have sat out from teaching and administrative duties in order to instead participate in public teach-ins and or organize or take part in online events. So this is really, really awesome that this is happening, because the ability of teachers and professors to really talk about this in a transformative way with their students is really powerful. And if you check out my Twitter at activist Eleanor, I highlighted this as well. There was this rad professor, Maricel Lebron, who had a thread about the history of policing as it relates to systemic racism and also the class struggle vis-a-vis strikes and whatnot. And she also talks about the power of teachers in sharing this grossly revised and sanitized history. So you can see that thread. I retweeted it on my Twitter at activist Eleanor. But it's a really powerful moment because and Forbes even wrote about this and asked the question, oh, is this just a one-off, or is it a harbinger of more turbulence, quote unquote, to come? And the guy wrote, the social unrest being witnessed on America's streets will both influence and be influenced by what goes on within the walls of our nation's universities. And that is so true, and it really highlights the importance of not only access to education, because a lot of folks don't have access to university education, and only have access to very shitty public school education. But it also speaks to the importance of having educational conversations and educational resources outside of those walls, so that, for instance, there's a lot of like Zoom meetings being held by professors that are professors at places like Harvard, but you can sign up even if you're not a student at Harvard and get some insight into, hey, like the racist history of policing, or systemic racism.
Does Harvard cover that?
Well, that's the thing. It's like these are professors that are a part of this hashtag scholar strike that are kind of widening their classrooms to include the entire country and beyond for these 2 days to specifically address systemic racism and injustice in that paradigm.
Yeah, this is beautiful. 2 notes. One is I didn't read the whole Forbes article, but even if it was, essentially positive in its coverage, I do love the propaganda of, or is there more turbulence coming? Right. Like, would you call, growth pains turbulence? Oh, I'm getting taller. Wow, that sounds turbulent. Or would you call, the pains of giving birth turbulence? Mm-hmm. Like, instead, this is a very positive step towards positive growth. Instead of being called turbulence, it should be called like progress. It should be called, just positive. Is there more positivity to come? Right. But this is turbulence in the face of a unfettered capitalist corporatist world that seeks kind of calm, peaceful profit and exploitation. Mm-hmm. Like, if you get in the way of that type of thing, you are causing turbulence to the exploitative systems. You are making it a bumpy road for their ongoing extraction of the, they're extracting people's lives, they're extracting their resources, they're extracting their money, they're extracting their well-being, and you're making it bumpy. So don't do that.
Bumpy. Well, and that's the thing too. It really highlights the role of the activist scholar or the activist teacher. It's one thing to stand there and talk about racism and be like, oh, this is racist and da 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 da. It's another thing to actually then act on that information. That is a threat to the status quo, which is, terrifying to the powers that be, that they're places of learning, they're hallowed halls
and sports as well.
Right. They're hallowed halls of, white supremacist support for the United States as an institution is under threat when those teachers, when those professors stand up and say, you know what, I'm not just going to talk about how racism is something that America has grappled with. I'm going to talk about how this is, I'm going to remove myself from the classroom and highlight the ongoing issues with this grotesque racism that is deeply rooted in the system. Holy shit, that's terrifying.
And what, as Cornel West said recently at the Movement for a People's Party, he said, this is the beautiful pushback. It's the pushback against the exploitation, against the empire. The beautiful pushback. And it
I love your rendition.
It absolutely is. And something else that should be mentioned is part of the reason the universities and education system have ended up in this point is because of the Trilateral Commission and the I believe the Powell Memo also discussed it, where this is not an accident that our university has ended up in a far more supportive to empire, supportive to capitalist exploitation place. They ended up there by design. Now it took decades, and it's not 100%. This is a sliding scale, shades of gray to get to this place. But those documents in the Trilateral Commission, which said there was a crisis of democracy, too many people are getting involved in the democratic systems, one of the most important steps they said was to take back the universities. The educational systems that are in place in our country are educating people in a progressive, humanitarian kind of bent.
A lot of protests were growing from universities around the Vietnam and civil rights era.
Right. And this is 1973, so this is, right after they're seeing the grand impacts of these of the pushback. And so they said that we need to take back these universities, and we can do it by slowly forcing out the professors that are more leftist, that are more inclined towards social justice, and telling workers that they have a right to get together and organize and fight back. And we could do it by the money involved, the massive institutions and corporations that now fund universities. And now we're in a place where universities are far more for profit than they ever have been before. They used to be largely not for profit. They used to be largely aimed at educating a society so that we had a better, more competitive nation against other nations. Now they are merely want to enrich themselves and their board members, while people are often exploited. I mean, some people end up in the jobs they want, but many do not.
Yeah.
So yeah. Good for them for organizing the pushback.
Yeah, and you can follow that. You really like the word pushback, don't you?
Well, I was going off of Cornel West,
Dr. West. But
he likes. He's very good with that, and I need to get better at it. He's very good with the repetition in his speech.
Yeah.
There's the pushback, and he says it 3 times in a row.
Well, it's that kind of like that sermon-y kind of thing that he's got going there. Right. But what was I going to say? Oh, you can follow, again, if you're listening to this, well, even if you're listening to this after Wednesday the 9th, you can follow what went down or what is expected to continue by looking up the hashtag Scholar Strike on Twitter. And you can also follow I'm not sure if Gannon is there, but Anthea Butler, Dr. Anthea Butler is on Twitter, so you can follow her. Yeah.
Cool.
So, one thing that I wanted to bring up, this was actually suggested by my mama. Well, she sent me this article, and I was like, ooh, I like this. So this article talks about the issue of reparations, which some folks might be familiar with. It's the idea that reparations be paid to Black folks because of slavery, and so the writer here, who is Michael Harriot, he basically makes the point that reparations is not just about slavery. So he says basically that, there are predictable, shitty arguments against reparations for slavery, like, oh, slavery was so long ago, not everyone owns slaves.
I didn't do it.
Right. I didn't do it.
I didn't do it.
And, well, that was back then. This is now. What do you do for Black folks who aren't the descendants of slaves? Yada yada yada. So basically, the argument here is that slavery really should be considered a tiny sliver of the argument for reparations, and really what we should be looking at is the theft what Harriot calls the Great White Theft. And he starts with an example from a town in South Carolina where black kids had to literally almost like take their lives in their hands. They had to cross like flooded riverbeds and things like that to get to school, while white folks were picked up in nice school buses. And this is the latter part of the 40s, 1948, and bused to nice schools where they learned nice things, and then they went on to nice universities, and yet So basically he uses South Carolina as an example here. So they go to South Carolina had 7 white-only colleges and 1 black college. South Carolina taxpayers paid, which obviously includes black folks, paid for 7 whites-only colleges. South Carolina taxpayers paid for 0 black colleges because South Carolina State University was a land-grant college, which meant that it was founded with federal money after the Civil War. Now, here's the other point. The majority of South Carolina taxpayers were black.
Mm-hmm.
So this basically means that every black taxpayer in South Carolina was paying for younger white kids to have access to those school buses while their kids were walking 10 miles or trying to cross flooded plains or riverbeds where some of them drowned and died. And every white person in South Carolina was benefiting from that stolen property.
So in a way, the labor of the black folks in that state was still being exploited and stolen to support white society. In a way, it's still a form of slavery.
Exactly. And then, of course, he outlines redlining, which basically is the idea that, basically what happened was after the New Deal, the HOLC created color-coded residential security maps of 239 cities. And these maps highlighted neighborhoods that were good investments versus neighborhoods that were shitty investments. And the risky neighborhoods were highlighted in red, hence the name redlining. And that was, it included every one of the 239 cities' black neighborhoods, every single one. And this meant that those neighborhoods did not get any investments. So basically, black folks could not take part in this surge of home ownership. And still today, homes in neighborhoods where the population is majority black are valued on average $48,000 less than homes in white neighborhoods. And the result is a $156 billion cumulative loss in black-owned property values, even when the white neighborhoods have the same amenities, crime rates, and resources as black neighborhoods. And circling back to the education issue, 36% of education funding comes from property taxes. So if your property is valued as shitty, then you are not going to get as much education funding from it. So that means that there's a theft of $23 billion, Harriot notes, because these homes are valued as less than white homes in similar neighborhoods.
And a couple other ones that I had in my last book, kind of down the similar path. Well, one is that one of the jobs FEMA does is they go into a destroyed place from a disaster, and they offer to buy up people's ruined homes for, a good price for a ruined house. And basically allow the people to start over, so they take the money and they go live somewhere else or whatever. And it turns out FEMA has almost exclusively been buying up houses in white neighborhoods, probably because they realized they could eventually, once they cleaned them up or whatever, once the disaster was over, resell them and actually make money, by owning that property, by FEMA purchasing it. So FEMA has been running around helping white areas and not helping black areas, when black areas are far often, statistically speaking, far more destroyed in natural disasters. Yeah. Another one was that in white dominant schools or whatever, schools that are mostly white, predominantly white, I can't remember the exact number, but it's billions of dollars nationwide more of federal funding goes to predominantly white schools than predominantly black schools. Mm-hmm. This is elementary, grade school level and high school, and it's just so yet again you see how our society is helping to fund white people more than they're helping to fund the progress of black people. And you can kind of go down the list. I mean, it keeps happening again and again. And this isn't even talking about standard systemic racism, like black people are less likely to get jobs, even if they have the exact same qualifications, that kind of thing. This isn't even getting into that.
Well, and it spreads into all aspects of life, because people in those historically redlined areas, they pay higher auto insurance rates, they pay more for fresh food, they have less access to medical care, they pay higher interest rates on their loans, they have to pay higher bail amounts, they're more likely to have to pay bail. They have to wait longer to vote, and they receive more parking violations. So, like, legit, like every fucking part of your life is affected then by the history of redlining and this history of basically what he calls the Great White Theft. And that means that every single black person is negatively affected by this theft, while every white person is positively affected by this theft, because that means that we as white folks have more access to the things that have been stolen from black people today. Like, not like 1860s, but like fucking today. And this is not about white guilt. Fuck that shit. That's not my point. My point is that reparations aren't about some shit that happened hundreds of years ago. It's about shit that still happens to this day.
Right.
And the fact that my life, if I were black, would have the upwards hill to even be where I am right now, which is not that financially stable, would be like exponentially fucking steeper and filled with more obstacles if I was just black. And that is the argument for reparations. It's not the issue of slavery should really be, is Michael Harriot's point, should really be a tiny sliver of this argument.
Yeah, I think those are all great points, and I hate when people are like, especially when this argument usually or often comes from black people, where you successful black people, where they're rich or whatever, you know, the Ben Carsons and the Herman Cains and the what's his name?
I don't know. You took the two I was thinking of.
Well, I was gonna say an actor, but Morgan Freeman.
Oh, Morgan Freeman. Yeah.
Morgan Freeman, and I think maybe even Bill Cosby before his downfall, but probably has the same argument now. But no, there's not really much racism, because look at me, and it's like, you're the exception that proves the rule, motherfucker. You goddamn asshole. Okay, so in these last 4 minutes, because I think this is obviously a big story, and we only touch on it here and there. We only touch on, COVID-19 and the pandemic here and there, because it is so aggressively covered everywhere else that it's not like you need to come to us for the redacted angle. I've covered before how on Redacted Tonight how there are generic drugs. There's a generic drug cocktail that has proven far more effective in treating COVID-19 than the ones that are mainly being pushed, because there's not money in generic drugs. They don't make these big pharmas making billions upon billions of dollars on whatever treatments they can put forward to help deal with COVID-19, and they're not going to make that money if they come out and say, hey, this generic drug cocktail has proven pretty effective in helping people. So anyway, if you know someone with it, definitely look that up. But the new story we have for you, if you want to go ahead, do the honors.
Yeah. So a new study, and this study was put out by the IZA Institute of Labor Economics, shows that more than 250,000 COVID cases between August 2nd and September 2nd came from the Sturgis rally. That's approximately 19% of all U.S. cases added last month.
For those who don't know, Sturgis is not a fish rally, right? What is the Sturgis rally?
Sturgis is a motorcycle rally, but really it's a rally for the fucking dregs of society. And I say that as someone who has known people who have played at that rally.
You mean performed?
Yeah, performed. It's something that brings almost like 500,000 people.
Also, you're a motorcycle rider, and you have been good friends with motorcycle riders.
Yes, and none of my friends have ever gone to Sturgis, because it is it is fucking it. It's like Missing Link Central. Like what? It's fucking. I'm sorry, but it really is. It's like the dumbest, and I say this understanding, of course, that our education system is shit, but it is a collection of the dumbest, most racist, most hateful people all coming together on two wheels and comparing Nazi tattoos. Like that is what Sturgis is.
And for the one guy out there who's like, hey, I go to Sturgis and I'm a leftist who loves all your stuff. Exception that proves the rule.
Right.
The name of this episode is Exception that proves the rule.
Well, I mean, and I've never been to Sturgis, but I've heard from people that have performed at Sturgis that, I mean, one of my friends who's Egyptian, he was like, I've never felt so desperate to try and prove that I'm white in my entire life.
He's like, I got all these Nazi tattoos. I don't know why.
Well, because he's like light skinned, so he's like, quote unquote passable, and he was like, I've never felt such an urge to like just powder my face with with white foundation, because it's legitimately terrifying. And so I like a lot of. So and Sturgis, when I heard that Sturgis was going forward, I was like, well, this is just going to be an explosion of COVID,
because COVID doesn't hurt me, motherfucker. I'm a tough guy. My lungs are tougher than anybody's.
Yeah. So basically, this was a.
You know what's treated my COVID is whiskey. I just drink whiskey. I just smother the corona with the whiskey.
So yeah. Basically, and this is in South Dakota, which is a very rural state. So this influx of a shit ton of bikers really crushed the state's ability to manage. And of course, as some of you might not know, South Dakota is home to a lot of indigenous peoples and indigenous reservations who have already been hit incredibly hard by COVID. Navajo Nation, for instance, which is not in South Dakota, but south of there has been hit hardest of any of the places in the United States. And, this is largely because indigenous folks have the least amount of access to healthcare and public resources than any other group. And so the added fact that this took place in a area that is that has a lot of indigenous folks just adds that much more insult to injury. So basically, and this is also Kristi Noem is the governor of South Dakota. And so this extreme spike in COVID has added $12.2 billion in public health costs. I don't even understand what that means.
That's crazy. 250,000 cases, and this kind of shouldn't be surprising, but this does seem to be increasingly where and how the coronavirus has gotten so bad in the U.S. is because of events like this or like bars. It's largely not being spread by even at things like protests. So you're like, okay, at a protest, you've got 1,000 people all packed relatively close on a street. But there's some differences. One is they're all wearing masks. They're largely not facing each other most of the time, real close. And those two things have proven to be some of the biggest ways that this is not being spread. And then you look at something like Sturgis or even just bars. Apparently bars. So some states are actually revealing where the hot spots have come from because they've done some tracking. And one of the states I remember looking at, they had found that like the vast majority of spreading of the coronavirus in their state has come from like bars and restaurants and basically places where people take off their mask and are next to each other and think it's fine. And so they're spitting in each other's faces. And the other thing is at bars, they're like the bars that are opening continue because they want to seem fun and look, we're back. They're continuing to play loud music. Yeah. It's like, what do people do when there's loud music? They talk as loud as they can and spit in each other's faces.
So just really quick before we wrap up, I think it's worth noting that South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem allowed Sturgis to go forward. Not only that, and this is from today, this article, South Dakota Governor uses the coronavirus relief funds that she got for a $5 million tourism ad. Despite the fact that her state is now number 2 in the fucking nation for COVID cases.
Used on
at
billboards.
439 new cases per 100,000 people. And
So-
her ad is basically like, South Dakota, the land of the free. I used $5 million of medical funds for a tourism ad telling more people to come here.
So they're like, now that more people have died because we didn't use the money to help people, there's more room to enjoy
Right.
South Dakota.
Yeah, so that's just...
Wow.
That's the kind of stupid that even duct tape can't fix.
I was hoping you'd done that way.
Thank you.
I totally agree. All right. Thanks a lot for joining us, folks. Please go on over to patreon.com/commoncensored, where we're going to do 10 to 15 more minutes. And, if you feel like you got anything out of this episode, that would be awesome if you can support the show that way. Also, the online vigil for Kevin Zeese, one of the founders of Popular Resistance, and that is just one of so many things he accomplished. That is September 19th at 3 p.m. Eastern, so that's noon Pacific, and it's at bit.ly, bit.ly/Kevin Zeese, and capital K, capital Z. I'm not sure if that matters, but do it anyway. All right. Hope to see you there, and we will also be doing a live stream, so on video this coming Sunday. I believe it's 8 p.m. Is it
8 p.m. Eastern.
8 p.m. Eastern at youtube.com/momentofclarity. And come hang out with us there.
Indeed. Until next time.
Keep fighting.
Act out.